If you saw me walking down the street in this quiet town, hair brushed, a ring on my finger, a polite smile for the neighbors, you'd probably think I was living the safe, happy life everyone wants. My name is Hannah. I'm 32. I moved here for my husband's job, traded city noise for cul-de-sac silence, late-night bars for laundry rooms, and polite conversation about hydrangeas. But at night, when the house creaks and the wind sighs in the trees, that's when my story begins. When the doors are closed and the world is quiet, the truth leaks in, because I don't sleep, not the way other people do. I lie awake, heart galloping in the dark, mind racing with everything I can't say. Maybe that's why I let the dog in. Ben, my husband, is a good man. He works hard, tries harder, kisses me on the cheek before bed, but he sleeps like the dead, sprawled in the guest room because his late-night emails might keep me up. That's what he says, but I know it's more. He's tired. We both are, but for different reasons. His are measured in deadlines and meetings. Mine in silent hours and invisible weight. The first week in this house, I lay in the big bed alone, listening to Max, our dog, scratching at the bedroom door. I'd brought Max with me from my old life, the one before Ben, before the suburbs, before I started telling everyone I was fine. Max is a rescue, a tangle of shepherd and something bigger, maybe lab or wolf. He's got these golden eyes that seem to see right through me. Sometimes I wonder if he's the only one who ever did. Told Ben I wanted Max to sleep in the laundry room. It's just until he settles in, I said, pretending I believed it. But every night, the scratching started, soft at first, then more insistent. Sometimes there'd be a low whine, like he was pleading through the crack beneath the door. First, I ignored it. I told myself rules were important. Dogs needed boundaries, marriage needed them too. But sleep never came. Instead, I'd listen to the wind, count the seconds between Max's scratches, feel my chest get tight with that old, familiar ache. Loneliness, like water rising in a locked room. By the third night, the sound had become unbearable. A slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap that seemed to echo inside my bones. I sat up, heart pounding, knuckles white on the sheets. I told myself not to give in. That's what Ben would say. But Ben wasn't there. Ben was in the next room, behind his own door, breathing slow and steady, dreaming of numbers and graphs and things that never kept him awake. I crossed the carpet, feet cold, breath trembling. My hand hovered on the doorknob. I imagined Ben waking up, coming in, shaking his head. Hannah, you're spoiling him. But Ben wouldn't wake up. He never did. Not when I cried. Not when I whispered his name in the dark. Not even when the nightmares came back. I opened the door. Max pushed in with a rush of warmth and fur, tail thumping against my leg. He didn't jump or bark, just looked up at me, eyes wide, waiting for permission. I knelt down, buried my face in his neck. He smelled like earth and wind and something wild. For the first time in days, I exhaled. "Come on, Max," I whispered. "Just for tonight." He curled up beside the bed, one big paw stretched out so it just touched my foot. I slid beneath the covers, heart still racing but quieter now, like a song winding down. Max's breathing was deep and steady, a metronome for my anxious thoughts. That night I dreamed I was running, fields opening up in front of me, Max beside me, always just within reach. When I woke, sunlight was filtering through the curtains, and Max was still there, chin on the mattress, golden eyes watching me. Ben was gone, the house quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the low, soft whine as Max yawned. I told myself it was a one-time thing, I'd be strong. But the next night, the scratching started again. The next night, I caved faster. By the end of the week, Max didn't wait for me to open the door. He learned to nudge it gently at first, then with a determined shove that sent it creaking inward. Ben never seemed to notice. He'd fall asleep in the guest room, his laptop humming through the wall. I stopped asking him to come back. The space between us grew wider, a river crossed only by awkward smiles and grocery lists. Max, though, he crossed it every night. He'd enter my room like he belonged there, curl up at my side or rest his head on the bed. Sometimes in the bio, small hours. I'd wake to the feeling of his nose pressing against my hand, as if reminding me, "You're still here. You're not alone." The days grew colder, nights longer. Ben's work got busier, more business trips, more late dinners. Sometimes, he'd forget to call. When he was home, he'd move through the house like a shadow, always almost touching me, never quite reaching. Max filled the spaces Ben left behind. He became my quiet company, following me from room to room, pressing close when I stood at the window, head bowed, fighting tears. When I brushed my teeth at night, he'd sit by the door, tail wagging softly as if to say, "I'm waiting." One night, the wind howled against the windows, rattling the panes. I woke gasping from a nightmare. Something about water, drowning, hands that wouldn't reach back. My chest was tight, throat raw. I rolled over and there was Max, paws on the mattress, eyes shining in the half-light. I didn't say a word. I just reached out, tangled my fingers in his fur, let my breathing slow to match his. He curled closer, big body pressed against the bed, warmth seeping into my bones. The fear ebbed, replaced by something heavier but safer. Grief, maybe, or relief. That night I slept. When morning came, Ben was already gone. I stood at the window with Max at my side, watching the sun rise over the neighbor's lawn. I felt strange, tender, raw, almost guilty. Like I'd broken some rule I didn't remember agreeing to. But I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after. Waking in the night to the feeling of Max's heartbeat, steady and alive, grounding me when I couldn't find my own. A week later, Ben mentioned it in passing. "You know, Max seems extra attached lately. Are you feeding him scraps or something?" I just smiled, shook my head, and said nothing. How do you explain to someone that a dog's touch is sometimes all that keeps you together? That you can love someone and still feel completely, utterly alone? That the only thing holding you above water is the warmth of fur against your skin, a soft nose pressed into your hand, a silent promise whispered in the dark. "I'm here." If Ben noticed how tired I looked, he never said. If he heard Max slip into my room at night, he never mentioned it, but I noticed. And so did Max. And that was enough to keep the darkness at bay, at least for now. There are some mornings when you wake up and for a split second, believe that everything has changed. That maybe last night's peace wasn't just a fluke, that the ache you carried for months has finally given up, slunk off into the shadows and let you breathe. But when I woke that morning, Max's warm head was still resting on the edge of my bed. The bedroom door, once so carefully shut, was wide, open, letting in the watery dawn. I lay there for a long moment, listening to Max's slow breathing, unwilling to disturb the fragile spell that held the world together. It was only when I sat up that I realized my hand was numb, pinned gently under the weight of Max's paw. I tried to pull away, but he pressed down, just a little, as if to say, "Not yet, not now." The sensation was oddly comforting. I watched him for a moment, my mind drifting. I could hear Ben's footsteps in the hallway, the low hum of his morning routine, coffee, computer, the mechanical rhythm of a life that no longer touched mine. I should have gotten up. I should have started the day. Instead, I stayed there, hand trapped beneath Max's paw, letting the moment last. It wasn't always like this. I wasn't always this fragile. There was a time when I'd prided myself on my independence, my toughness. But that was before the move, before the job change, before Ben's attention started to drift further away each day, before the nights grew so quiet that every thought echoed in my head like a stone dropped down a well. Back then, Max was just a dog, a rescue with a bad limp and a haunted look. I found him at a shelter, pressed against the back wall of a concrete run, refusing to look at anyone. The volunteers told me he was probably a lost cause, that he didn't trust people, that he might never come out of his shell. But when I knelt beside him, he lifted his eyes, just once, and in that look I saw 1,000 unspoken promises. I knew what it was to be cornered by fear, to wait for someone to offer a hand and mean it. So I offered mine, and Max took it. Slowly, day by day, he let me in. Now, as the sun crept over the horizon, I wondered if I'd ever given him enough. In return, Ben left for work early, a kiss on the forehead, the faint smell of aftershave lingering in the hall. I mumbled, "Have a good day," but he was already gone. The house was silent except for Max, who trailed me from room to room, never more than a few feet away. I wanted to tell him to go nap, to enjoy the backyard, to give me just a little space. But when I looked at him, waiting, loyal, I found I couldn't say a word. That afternoon, I tried to shake off the heaviness clinging to me. I cleaned, made a list for groceries, scrolled absently through social media. My friends posted photos of brunches, park days, family gatherings I was never invited to anymore. I tried to remember the last time I'd laughed with someone, really laughed, and couldn't. It started to rain. Not a gentle drizzle, but a full summer downpour, thunder rumbling low and angry in the distance. Max hated storms. I could see it in the way he paced the hallway, ears back, tail low. He kept looking at me, searching my face for some sign that things were okay. "I'm right here," I told him, voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "You're safe." But the words felt empty, even to me. As the rain hammered the windows, my thoughts drifted. Back to the night my father died, to the silent house and the phone call that split my life in two. I'd lain in bed, paralyzed, waiting for comfort that never came. Even Ben, kind as he was, had never truly understood how deep the fear ran, how loud the emptiness could get. Only Max had seemed to sense it, curling up at my feet, refusing to let me vanish. That night replayed in my mind as thunder rattled the glass. I tried to distract myself, reading, scrolling, cleaning dishes that didn't need cleaning. But the heaviness pressed in, relentless. When evening came and Ben texted that he'd be late, "Don't wait up, big deadline," I felt something inside me snap. I lay in bed, the house shuddering with every clap of thunder. I tried to close my eyes, tried to remember how it felt, to be held, to be known, but all I could feel was the absence of warmth, of safety, of someone to say my name like it mattered. I didn't notice Max slip in until I felt the mattress dip. He climbed up, careful and quiet, and laid down beside me. For a moment, I almost told him to get off, to go back to his bed, to be a good dog. But I didn't have the strength. He pressed his head into my side. I turned, and our eyes met, in the dark. Something in his gaze was so gentle, so knowing, that my breath caught. That's when he placed his paw in my hand. Just that, nothing more. I froze, overwhelmed by the simple, stubborn act of presence. For a long time, I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't speak. I just let him hold me there, both of us listening to the storm as it battered the house. Eventually, my breathing slowed. My thoughts, wild and sharp, began to settle. The terror didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. I squeezed Max's paw. He licked my wrist once, warm and reassuring. Sometime in the small hours, the storm passed. The house quieted, shadows softened, and I drifted into the first deep sleep I'd had in weeks. When I woke, the sun was rising and Max was still there, my hand numb beneath his paw, but my heart, for the first time in a long while, felt almost whole. The days that followed blurred together, but something had changed. Max wouldn't leave my side, not for meals, not for walks, not even when Ben came home and called him away. I noticed the way Ben's brow furrowed, how he started asking questions. Has Max always been this clingy? But I brushed them off. How could I explain? How could I admit that sometimes the only thing standing between me and the darkness was the weight of a dog's paw on my hand? That week, I found myself reaching for Max in the night, searching for his warmth, his steady breath. Sometimes I'd wake to his nose nudging my arm, his eyes watchful and patient. Once, in the half-light before dawn, I whispered, "Thank you, Max, for staying." He just pressed closer, as if to say, "Always." I didn't know then how much more I would come to need him, or how soon I'd discover that no matter how tightly you try to hold the pieces of your life together, sometimes you need someone else to carry them for you. if only for a little while. But for now, in the soft hush of morning, with Max beside, me and the storm outside finally gone, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was safe. The days after the storm melted together into a strange sort of routine. I'd never meant for Max to become my shadow, but everywhere I went, every room, every step, every sigh, there he was. Sometimes I tried to shoo him out, urging him to nap in the sun or play in the backyard. But the moment I was alone, anxiety pooled in my chest and Max would be there, tail thumping, watching me as if he was the only one who noticed when my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. It didn't take long for Ben to notice. "Did you put glue on that dog?" he joked one evening, pausing in the kitchen with his mug of coffee. Max sat at my feet, chin on my knee, eyes fixed on me. Ben grinned, but there was an edge behind it, a flicker of something he didn't say. I forced a smile. "He just likes company, I guess." Ben leaned in, brushing my shoulder. "He's not going to let me have my wife back, is he?" There was laughter in his voice, but also a faint, uncomfortable question. I didn't answer. I just scratched Max's ears, feeling a pang of guilt twist inside me. That night, for the first time, I tried to push Max away. When bedtime came, I shut the door softly and told him, "Not tonight, Max. You need your own space. And so do I." He whimpered softly, nose pressed against the crack, but I stood firm, at least I tried to. The silence in the room was deafening. Without Max's gentle breathing, the darkness felt colder, emptier. I curled up under the blankets, staring at the ceiling. In the other room, Ben's snoring rose and fell, an offbeat lullaby. I shut my eyes and willed myself to sleep, but my thoughts wouldn't quiet. Memories flashed in the dark. My father's funeral, the move, all the ways Ben and I had become polite strangers. Minutes stretched into hours. My chest tightened, breaths coming shallow and quick. It was happening. Again, a panic attack creeping in like an old, unwelcome friend. I pressed my hands to my ribs, fighting the rising wave, and then, just as the tears started, I heard it. The soft scrape of claws against wood. A low, desperate whine. "Max," I whispered, barely able to speak. My hand fumbled for the doorknob, heart pounding. When I opened the door, Max barreled in, tail wagging, eyes shining with relief and urgency. He jumped onto the bed and pressed himself against my side, his body warm and solid. The panic slowly ebbed, replaced by the steady rhythm of his breath. I buried my face in his fur. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry." Max licked my hand, forgiving instantly. That night, I realized how tightly I'd wound myself, how afraid I'd become of being truly seen. Max saw it all, every flaw, every crack, and never looked away. Ben, sweet, distracted Ben, never seemed to notice. The next morning, Ben found Max curled at my feet. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I could feel a wall growing between us, but didn't know how to lower it. Days passed. I tried again to keep Max at bay. Sometimes, out of shame or stubbornness, I'd make him sleep in the hallway. But inevitably, each night ended the same. Me, alone and shaking, and Max waiting. Faithfully until I let him back in. I started to accept it. Maybe I wasn't as strong as I'd hoped. Maybe that was okay. One Sunday, Ben suggested a walk together. Just us, no dog. He sounded nervous, almost rehearsed. "Let's leave Max here today," he said. "Just you." And me, like old times. I hesitated, glancing at Max, who sat by the door, ready as always. "He'll be fine," Ben insisted. "You and I need this." So I left Max at home. We walked through the quiet streets, sun-washed and humming with distant lawnmowers. Ben tried to talk, filling the air with stories from work, plans for the future. I nodded, smiled at the right moments, but my heart wasn't in it. I kept looking back, half expecting Max to appear around the corner, somehow tracking me down. When we returned, Max was waiting at the window. His whole body trembled with excitement when I stepped inside, as if he'd spent hours worrying I might not return. I knelt down and hugged him, a surge of emotion rising in my throat. Ben watched us from the doorway, something unreadable in his eyes. You really missed him, huh? I opened my mouth to answer, but the truth stuck in my throat. How could I explain that sometimes Max felt more like home than this house ever had? That his presence was a balm for wounds I couldn't name? That night, Ben and I sat together in silence, the television flickering shadows across the living room. He reached for my hand, fingers warm and familiar. For a moment, I tried to pretend everything was okay, that Max hadn't become my lifeline, that I wasn't slipping further away. But I could feel Max's eyes on me from across the room. Quiet, waiting, always ready. I thought about locking him out again, about drawing boundaries, but the idea felt cruel now, like shutting out sunlight or air. So I left my door open. Max patted in, slow and gentle, as if asking permission. I patted the bed and he leapt up, circling 3 times before settling by my feet. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house, the hum of the fridge, the distant murmur of Ben's voice on the phone, the steady breathing of the dog at my side. As sleep crept in, I realized something had shifted. I didn't just need Max, I wanted him. His loyalty, his warmth, the simple, unconditional love he offered without asking anything in return. At 3 a.m, I woke from another bad dream, waves crashing, hands slipping away, a desperate sense of falling. Max was there, head on my chest, gaze soft and understanding. He nudged me, gentle but insistent, until I wrapped my arms around him and let myself cry. For the first time, I didn't try to stop the tears. I let the grief out, soaking his fur, whispering apologies and thanks into the quiet dark. Max stayed, through it all, unmoving, unyielding. As dawn broke, I realized I wasn't as alone as I'd feared. Maybe I never had been. The next day, Ben noticed the circles under my eyes, the way I clung to Max during breakfast. He sat across from me, concern etching lines into his face. "Hannah," he said gently, "are you okay?" I wanted to answer. To spill everything, the loneliness, the panic, the way I'd come to rely on Max more than anyone else. But I couldn't find the words. Instead, I reached down, letting my fingers brush Max's fur. Ben watched, sadness flickering in his eyes. He stood and kissed my forehead, lingering just a little longer than usual. After he left, I sank onto the floor beside Max. He curled around me, warm and steadfast, and for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that maybe healing wasn't about shutting everyone out. Maybe it was about letting the right ones in, even if they walked on 4 legs. As the day wore on, I realized I no longer cared if anyone thought it strange. Max was my shadow, my guardian, my friend, and I wouldn't let anyone, not even myself, push him away again. The first sign that something was wrong came just after sunset, a text message that felt like a stone dropped in my stomach. "Mom, call me when you can. It's about Grandpa." The message was so ordinary, so simple, that I almost convinced myself it meant nothing. But dread crept in, thick and cold, and suddenly every shadow in the house seemed to sharpen. I dialed immediately, hands shaking. My mother answered on the first ring, her voice thick with unshed tears. Grandpa had fallen, again. This time it was bad. He was in the hospital, confused, asking for people who weren't there. "I know you're far away, honey," she said, voice wavering. "I just thought you should know." I promised to call her tomorrow, but as I hung up, the loneliness was suffocating. The distance between this suburb and my childhood home felt like an ocean. Ben was away, flown to a conference on the other side of the state. It was just me, the creak of old floorboards, and the sound of my own uncertain breathing. Max was there before I even realized I'd started to cry. His big head nudged under my hand, warm and insistent, as if to say, "I'm here, I'm here." I sank onto the edge of the bed, phone clutched to my chest, and he climbed up beside me without hesitation. I didn't care about house rules anymore. All that mattered was that he was close. I pressed my face into his fur, letting the tears come. Max didn't move. He simply lay across my lap, heavy and anchoring, soaking up every tremor in my body. I whispered everything I couldn't say out loud. I'm scared. I'm tired. I miss the family I can't see. I don't know how to do this alone. Thunder rumbled far off, making the windows shudder. The world outside closed in, the night pressing against the glass. In the silence, my thoughts grew darker. What if Grandpa didn't make it? What if I'd made a mistake moving here? What if Ben and I were too far gone to find our way back? As if reading my mind, Max pressed closer, warm and steadfast. His presence steadied me, kept the dark from swallowing me whole. Eventually, the tears ran out. I lay down. Max curled tight against me, his head on my shoulder, his heartbeat strong and steady. He stayed there as sleep finally dragged me under. But sleep didn't bring peace. Instead, my mind spun with nightmare images. Grandpa's hand slipping from mine. Ben standing in the driveway, suitcase in hand, looking back with empty eyes. Max lost somewhere in a storm, calling for me while I searched, powerless and afraid. I woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, heart thundering. Max was there, watching, waiting, as if he'd never left my side. I got up, restless and shaky, and padded into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. Rain was falling now, a steady tattoo, on the roof. I stood by the window, staring out at the puddles forming in the street. I wanted to call Ben, to tell him I needed him. But the thought of his distracted voice and tired sigh made my chest ache. Instead, I reached for Max, who sat at my feet, eyes following my every move. As the storm outside grew louder, so did the storm in my head. The guilt, the worry, the ache of being so desperately alone in a house filled with empty rooms, the urge to run, to pack a bag, drive through the night, go anywhere but here, rose like a tide. But Max blocked the doorway, tail wagging, gaze gentle but firm. He wasn't letting me go. I slid down the wall, burying my face in my knees. I can't do this, Max, I whispered. I can't be enough for everyone. He responded the only way he knew how. He climbed fully onto my lap, a heavy, loving weight that pinned me to the world. For a long time, I sat there, wrapped in dog and darkness, letting the night howl around us. The next day was a blur. I called my mom again, listened to updates about Grandpa, stable, but still confused. I tried to eat, but everything tasted like cardboard. I wandered the house, clutching my phone, jumping at every ping. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt. For one irrational moment, I hoped it was Ben, home early, ready to rescue me. But it was just a delivery. Flowers from my mother. A card scrawled with shaky handwriting. Wish you were here. Love you, Mom. I sat on the floor, card pressed to my chest, and let Max curl around me like a blanket. It was only when I felt his breath on my cheek that I realized I'd started to cry again. Later that evening, the power flickered. The storm had settled over the neighborhood, thunder rolling in waves, rain battering the roof. I lit candles, trying to make the house feel warm, but every room felt hollow. Max followed me from room to room, refusing to let me out of his sight. When I lay down, exhausted, he leapt onto the bed. No hesitation, no apology. He pressed himself against me, so close I could feel his heart beating in time with mine. That night, the nightmares returned, darker, sharper. I dreamed I was running through endless hallways, doors slamming shut behind me, voices calling my name but never reaching me. When I woke, choking on fear, Max was sprawled across my chest, grounding me, pulling me back from the edge. In the gray hours before dawn, I whispered, "Thank you for not leaving. Thank you for always coming back." He wagged his tail softly, eyes shining in the candlelight. I realized then how much he had saved me, not just from loneliness, but from myself. Every time I tried to push people away, every time I told myself I didn't need anyone, Max proved me wrong. He refused to be shut out, refused to let me disappear. As morning crept in, the storm finally eased. The world outside sparkled, fresh and washed clean. My phone buzzed, Ben's name lighting up the screen. Home tonight. Miss you. I typed back. I miss you too. For the first time in weeks, I almost meant it. When Ben finally came through the door that evening, suitcase in hand, Max barked once and ran to greet him. Ben knelt down, hugging the dog, laughing at his enthusiasm. He looked up at me, eyes searching my face. You okay? I nodded, and this time, when Ben hugged me, I let myself lean in. That night, as we all curled up together, Ben in his room, me in mine, Max roaming freely between us, I realized that healing doesn't always look the way you expect. Sometimes it's a messy, stubborn, four-legged thing that refuses to leave you alone, even when you ask it to. But when you need it most, it's already there. Morning sun poured through the bedroom window, painting golden stripes across the floor and over Max's sleeping form. For once, I had slept. Not the shallow, restless kind I'd come to accept, but real, soul-deep sleep. The kind that made you believe, if only for a little while, that you might be okay. Max stirred first, thumping his tail gently against the bed frame. His head lifted, brown eyes soft with sleepy devotion. In that moment, watching him wake up beside me, I realized just how much I owed this animal, how many nights he'd carried my fear, how many times he'd pressed himself between me and the darkness, asking nothing in return. Ben's voice came from the hallway, muffled, as he spoke on the phone. I could hear the low rumble, then laughter, familiar, distant. He hung up and stepped into the doorway, suitcase abandoned at his feet. He took in the scene. Me tangled in blankets, Max sprawled beside me, his mouth twisted with something like worry or regret. Did you sleep? He asked. I nodded. For the first time in weeks, Ben sat at the foot of the bed. Max immediately inched closer, placing his head on my lap. There was a long silence. Only the soft ticking of the clock and the sounds of a house finally waking up. Can we talk? Ben asked gently. I wanted to run, to hide in the kitchen or busy myself with chores, but there was nowhere left to go. My heart hammered as I nodded. Ben stared at his hands, searching for words. I know I've been gone a lot. I know it's been hard for you here. He hesitated, eyes drifting to Max. But I didn't realize how lonely you were. Not really. Until I saw you and Max last night. My throat tightened. I pressed my face into Max's fur, breathing in courage. I tried to tell you, I said, quietly, but I didn't want to seem weak or ungrateful. I thought maybe if I just waited, it would get better. But it didn't. It got worse. Ben slid closer, reaching for my hand. You should have told me. I'm sorry, Hannah, for not seeing it, for not being here when you needed me. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't look away. Sometimes I think I tried, but the words got lost. Max. Max always knew. He never let me shut him out, even when I wanted to. Ben's lips quirked in a sad smile. I was jealous of him, you know. The way he always knew how to help you, when I didn't. The way you looked at him, like he was your whole world. I shook my head. He isn't my whole world, but he's the part that never let me drown. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet was full, but not empty. Finally, Ben leaned in, voice thick with vulnerability. I want to be better. For you. For us. I want to know how to help. Even if that means sharing you with Max. A shaky laugh escaped me. You might not have a choice. He's very stubborn. Ben grinned, a real boyish grin I hadn't seen in months. Maybe that's what we both need. Max thumped his tail as if in agreement. The three of us sat together on the edge of the bed. Me, Ben, and Max, each holding a piece of the quiet, each finally letting ourselves be seen. The days that followed felt different. Ben started coming home earlier, making coffee for two instead of just himself. We took walks together, sometimes with Max leading the way, sometimes trailing behind, always part of the new rhythm we were learning. Ben listened more, not just to my words, but to the silences, the places I hesitated, the things I couldn't quite name. Sometimes late at night, I'd catch him scratching Max's ears, whispering secrets I'd never hear. There were setbacks, of course. Old habits clung stubbornly. Ben still had deadlines, and I still woke sometimes from bad dreams, gasping, searching the darkness. But Max was always there, in the hallway, at the foot of the bed, beside me on the couch. His presence a reminder that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to live with it, together. One night, a week after Ben's return, a sudden storm rattled the windows, thunder cracking the sky wide open. My heart pounded, fear twisting old and sharp in my chest. Ben was in the kitchen, late phone call echoing down the hall. Max pressed against my side, grounding me. But this time, instead of curling into myself and waiting for it to pass, I called out, voice shaking but strong. Ben, can you come in here? He came quickly, concern flashing in his eyes. I didn't hide behind Max, didn't pretend to be fine. I reached for Ben, let him hold me, let Max lie across our feet. We sat in the storm's wild noise together, 3 shadows tangled in the dim, and I realized something had changed. I had stopped hiding. Later that night, as the world settled back into quiet, Ben brushed a strand of hair from my face and whispered, "Thank you for letting me in." I smiled, tears shining in my eyes. "Thank you for coming back." Max sighed contentedly and curled tighter against me, warmth and hope settling in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole, messy and imperfect, but whole. In the days and weeks that followed, I learned how to speak up for what I needed. I called my mom more, told her the truth about the hard days. I wrote Grandpa letters, even if he was too confused to read them. I let Ben see my tears, my fears, and also my laughter. Max remained the silent glue that held it all together. Sometimes he'd enter my bedroom, even when Ben was there beside me. Sometimes he'd nudge Ben out of the way, demanding his share of love. And sometimes, on nights when the world felt too big, he'd simply lay his head on my hand, his touch, anchoring me to this life, this family. Looking back, it would be easy to say that Max saved me. But the truth is, he taught me to save myself, by reaching out, by letting others in, by believing I was worth saving. Ben, too, found his way back, not just to me, but to himself. Together, we built something new, clumsy, beautiful, fiercely, protected by the dog who refused to let any of us give up. Now, when I close my eyes at night, I am not afraid of the dark, because I know that if I need him, if I ever find myself slipping back into the lonely silence, Max will find his way to my side, and Ben will too. Dog entered my bedroom. Husband slept next door. But by the end, we all learned to wake up together. End.